Well, welcome everyone. How much fun to be back with you guys. We hope you've been enjoying research breaks as much as we have been pulling this together. We have a lot more planned. In fact, Naomi was laying out right into the fall and winter. And honestly, the more we think about it, the more this is just a great way to get all of you comfortable with some of the areas where we're exploring, and we're actually having people knock on our door and say, I would like to participate. And today's presentation exactly came from that. We were talking with folks about research breaks, and Jason sort of raised his hand and said he wouldn't mind participating with us. We're lucky to have Jason Simon with us today. Jason is the closest you get to the data guru for campus. He is our associate VP of data analytics and institutional research. Yes, there is such a thing called institutional research, and he's going to explain how his office and his team work like that. But but most importantly, for all of you as researchers, he is the gateway into a phenomenal reservoir of data regarding the institution. And this is a great opportunity to have him with us to explain how you can approach him and his team about getting access and the things that you wouldn't be able to get access to. So Jason, thank you so much. It really means a lot for you to step up and say you're willing to help us out with one of our research breaks. And we look forward to spending the hour with you. And just to remind you, we try to keep this to a 15, 20-minute presentation and then really let the questions take us from there where we want to go. So with that, let me turn it over to you. Okay, buddy?
Perfect. And I just want to say thank you to Mark and Naomi for the opportunity to speak with you today. This topic is one that we get a lot of questions on, and I'm very eager and excited to hear your feedback as well as we go through this. I think that this is an area where, quite frankly, we've needed some more clarification around to help people understand sort of the rules of the road, if you will. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get through. There's a lot of content here, but I want to try to stick to the 15 to 20 minutes. So let me just first of all start off a little bit about our office. So we're really tasked with helping the campus executives connect data with decision making. Second, we're also frequently viewed as the source of official data. Now, that doesn't mean we produce all the official data, but most of the times it means that we're in a consulting relationship with those offices that do. And so if it's a financial matter, then we're working with the finance division. If it's a research data issue, we're working with Mark, Naomi, and Chuck Tarantino. More importantly, though, we've really evolved as an office over the last 3 years. We're also now tasked with leading the UNT Insights Analytics program, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a few moments. Also, I should share with you that we have a very diverse team. We also have a large portion of our team has advanced and/or terminal degrees, and so we certainly do understand the expectations of conducting rigorous research, both quantitatively and qualitatively. And our staff frequently do write for publication, serve on task forces. We're presenting when we used to be able to present pre-COVID-19 at regional, local, and even national and international conferences. And so we want you to feel like that we're partners for you in this process and that we're here to help. So much so that in 2019, our office received a prestigious CIO 100 award for our work in data and analytics. And I will share with you that award, there was only 3 higher education institutions that year out of the 100. We received recognition with small companies you may have never heard of before, like Adobe, IBM, Google, United, etc. So we're really proud of that accomplishment, and I think it also speaks to the transformation that's happening within our office. So I think we're going to start off with a little classic pre-test, post-test. So we're going to ask a polling question now. So if you would, Please respond to the following survey. I have a thorough understanding of the sources of institutional data available to me for my research grants. Okay, perfect. So it doesn't take an advanced data statistician for me to recognize that we're skewing a little bit to the disagreement phase. So that's good. That means I have a pretty low bar, and hopefully by the end, here's your hint, hint. We're going to do pre-test, post-test. So we'll see how this number changes as we go further on. Okay, so why the conversation, and why do we feel like it's important? Frankly, I believe today's topic is really to try to connect your needs with our abilities and our resources, and in some cases our own bandwidth, both limitations and opportunities. But ultimately, as we continue to evolve in our tier 1 status, we recognize that there's a critical partnership that has to happen that connects grant writers and researchers, especially for those of you that are dealing with topics that leverage institutional data, with the DARE office. And we hope to do that in order to connect and to achieve those mutual goals, which is obviously securing additional research funding, securing publications, etc. That being said, we do want to talk about the following things with you today. So this is a very high level overview. I'll spend a little bit of time on each one of these things, but I want to level set so that you understand what we're able to provide, and more importantly, what we're not able to provide, as well as when we get into shared expectations. I want to just start off by saying I really, truly don't want this to sound preachy in any sense of the word. Rather, I want to just basically outline some of the areas where I think we can work better together. And I'm leveraging some of the challenges we've had over the last few years and trying to put some new opportunities around it so that way we can all advance the agenda that we have moving forward. So let's start off with, real quickly, what is your best source of data to start? And I would say it's our UNT Analytics program known as Insights. This is a training required opportunity for you. These are self-service dashboards that actually do surface individual student information. So there is a heightened level of FERPA role required. We will need to see that you've undergone FERPA training. We can help you with that. And we're also going to ask you to participate in our online Zoom Insights training, because we have migrated all of those training opportunities over into the online world. And you can see some of the various data domains that we have access to within Insights. And what I love about it is you're not dependent on DARE. You literally could go in if you're a night owl at 1:30 in the morning, or if you're an early riser at 5:30 in the morning, and get what you need. This is truly self-service. Insights is also where we're trying to help push more people towards, just because of the various opportunities that it presents itself with. For some of you, if you don't know, we do have a fact book online. It is an institutional research. Keep in mind, however, that is aggregated data. So that is looking at non-personally identifiable information. We have fact books that in some cases go back to the 1950s, 60s, but recognize that we don't have the original underlying data structures. We just have sort of the PDFs of the time period. Whereas moving forward, we have more of the underlying data. Many of the same trends that you're going to see in the fact book are somewhat presented in a more detailed level in Insights. But the fact book is a good place to go if you need a quick factoid to supplement when you're talking about your institutional makeup, or you're talking about the population under study. You can get some trend data there, so it's very helpful. We also have on that same website something called the Common Data Set. The reason why Common Data Set is so powerful for you as a researcher, especially if you're looking at interinstitutional trends. So you want to look at comparing UNT to Texas Tech, to Arizona State University, to you name it. All you would have to do is look up Common Data Set and the name of the school on Google, and you will find the same template. So it allows you to instantly compare us to others. There's information on admission statistics. There's information on financial aid statistics. And that's important when I start talking about some of the limitations we have around financial aid data. You won't get everything you possibly could want, but you're going to get a whole lot more information through the Common Data Set than you would be trying to scour all the different institutional pages trying to find it. There's also a very robust Texas Higher Education Data System. It's texashighereddata.org. And the tip that I will give you here is if you look in the upper right-hand corner of those screens, you'll see little red boxes that says more data. You click on that, you'll see another one that says interactive. And that is actually that most helpful screen that lets you compile similar statewide data that compares our institution and our outcomes to other Texas institutions. Now, obviously, it's not the full scope of all national data, but if your grant is to a Texas agency, it's a wonderful data source to cite. And then the last option we have is something we call the UNT FYI form. These are truly ad hoc requests. These are requests that you couldn't find the information or you have a slightly different flavor or angle. But please note that we do require 3 weeks advance notice in most cases. Primarily because of the responsibilities of the office, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, we don't have a never-ending supply of labor that we can turn around data requests. And in some cases, not wanting to cast any blame here, we have had requests come in 24 hours or less before a grant deadline, and our team has already have backlogged a bunch of work on their plate that day, and it just puts us in a very uncomfortable position where we have to say no. And I think the reason why I was excited to come talk to you about today is we don't want to be put into that position. We want to be a helpful customer service entity for you. But sometimes when there's not enough advanced planning, it really makes that very difficult for our team. And so some of the guardrails that I'll be talking about in the next screen or two is really designed to help us make sure that we can be in that service role for you. So there's some things to know about. Obviously, I've already mentioned that those sources are self-serve. You can get them at any time. We need for you to understand the difference between transactional data and official data. Depending on what you're asking for and the parameters that you need it in, the timing matters because we typically don't certify data as official until the end of a long semester. We can give you a census snapshot usually on the 12th or 20th class day, and that usually will serve the purpose. Now, if you're asking for something that's transactional in nature, meaning that it updates on a nightly basis, that's something we can talk through with you. The one thing that's important to know about our program is we've really integrated data governance and data management into the data products. And so we're always going to try to be transparent with you when you see data, especially within Insights, about what was the velocity of that data? How fast is it coming at you and whether or not it's official, snapshot, transactional, nightly. We want to be open with you on that because the challenge is in using transactional data, if you then come back to us and ask us to refresh that data, it might have swung wildly from day to day or even semester to semester. So it's just something to be aware of. The timing, we've already talked about that, but I want to share a little bit about the prioritization. So for us, we have to treat the requests that come in according to a tiered structure. This doesn't mean that what you're requesting is not important. It just means that there's certain requirements that our office has to maintain first and foremost. Typically, compliance and federal reporting and state reporting requirements always have to be a high priority. In a year where either your college or our institution as a whole is going through reaffirmation and reaccreditation, we have to prioritize those requests because we don't want to jeopardize our ability to be reaffirmed, because obviously then we lose our federal financial aid funding. And that makes recruiting students kind of hard if you don't have financial aid to give them. We also have to respond to Office of General Counsel requests for public information requests. And so we're on the clock once those come in. Second tier for us is the KPI strategic plan data requests from our president and cabinet. Just because typically we're on timelines there, we have to be responsive to those because usually they're responding to either external legislators, chancellors, the chancellor's office, et cetera. So that obviously comes through. Tier 3 is rather self-evident. Tier 4 requests, this is where you all would come in. Typically, it's requests related to individual units or responses with limited applicability broadly across our enterprise. So this is where our grant and research tier requests come in. And this is why we always say we want more advanced time, so that way we're not in the bind because of tiers 1, 2, and 3. Tier 5 is something we're going to talk a little bit further about. In the past, DARE has been asked to support graduate students in their data for dissertations. The challenge is, with related to that, we are increasingly being asked to do the data analysis for the graduate student. And in talking about this with Vice President McClellan and Provost Cowley, that seems to go against the spirit of the dissertation process in our mind. And so we would request, if you're chairing a dissertation and the student has an interest in institutional data, we can provide them with raw data, but it will be up to the student to do things like graduation rates, cohort tracking. Those are all challenging methodologies that are not push button delivery. And we will make it information available to them so that way they have the ability to track and trace. So we'll put dummy IDs in basically so they can go through the exercise of doing that. Obviously, from our perspective, dissertations and graduate projects are incredibly important. But in the scheme of the larger goals of the institution, we have to put limited staff resources on your research, your grants, and the other topics that are coming through. Now, I know this might create some questions, and I'm happy to respond when we get into the Q&A session on that. So here's some suggestions on how you can work with us for maximum effect. Please involve us early on. In some cases, we work best when you're even finding a grant for the first time, and it may be 3 or 4 months before you're ready to apply. Give us that heads up. Let us know so we can start to put on our calendar when we can circle back with you and say, okay, are you going to be submitting a request for us for information? We want to be in a consulting, an advisory role. So please consult with us prior to submitting a data request. We have found that it's far better for us to talk through your needs live or via Zoom than just get a data request, because once we start furnishing data back, it may generate additional questions on what you needed. So did you want us to exclude certain kinds of variables? Did you want us to aggregate data into certain subgroups? When you ask us for a list of STEM majors, are you asking us based off of how the Department of Homeland Security defines a STEM major, or are you asking us in relation to how the granting agency is defining STEM majors? That all matters. And so we want to be able to resolve some of those issues before we invest the time in literally manually hand coding the programs that are going to extract, manipulate, and surface data back to you. Please work with us so that we know your deadlines in advance. Help us understand when the heartbeats are, if you will, so that way we can allocate those resources so that you get the data back in the time that you need it, and also with enough lead time that you can synthesize and comment on it and reflect on it in your writing. The challenge with us getting information back to you at the last minute is that not only does it create a challenge for us, but it also, I think, creates challenges for the grant writer and the researcher, because now you're forcing your own process in order to make it happen in time. In some cases, for data gathering that goes above and beyond, and so what I mean by that is if there's significant data work needed, we would like to discuss with you including DARE as part of your budget for your grant, because there are hard costs related to doing this work, and depending on some of the requests that you have of us, we could be talking about up to a month of analyst time. We have had NIH and NSF grants in the past that have literally taken a staff member off of their full-time job and basically taken almost an entire month of data coding, processing, and validation to get that data back. And in the scheme of a $2 or $3 million grant, we recognize that that's not a huge amount of money, but we just want to make sure that you're aware of it, so that way we can work forward. The last thing I would say, and I think this is just a request for some consideration. So if the DARE unit does do a majority of the data processing, we certainly don't want to be first, second, or even third author, but we would like to be able to recognize the professionals who do bring a very high degree of statistical fortitude with them to be able to help in that process. And so we can talk that through. We certainly don't want to be imposing, but we would like to get some recognition for the hard work and the intellectual property of that researcher if that's something you're asking us to help you with. So we do have some limitations that we want you to be aware of. Probably the one area that we have the most, we hear the most concern is when we get a data request and the researcher will say, but IRB approved it. Well, IRB approval is an important step in protecting human subjects and protecting vulnerable populations. Unfortunately, though, it does not always equivalate to FERPA authorization. So just because IRB is protecting human subjects doesn't mean that the institution can legally give you de-identified information. We have FERPA requirements and PIAI requirements that we have to meet. So we would ask your consideration in understanding that, and we can talk through those issues.
And
Yes.
Jason, thirdly, it means you also, as the person providing the data, you have to give permission,
Correct.
based on time and effort. So there are multiple steps here that every researcher should understand.
Yes, thank you for saying that. And my bias right away, by the way, is we want to be proactive in partnering. And so sometimes I gloss over some of those areas where we have to beg and borrow ourselves. The second one that I want you to be aware of, and this one has popped up a lot in the last year, is a Dear Colleague letter that was issued to all Title IV funding agents. The Federal Privacy Technical Assistance Center basically made a ruling that when a student submits their FAFSA, their free application for federal student aid, that is data that is a relationship between that student and their family and the federal government, not the relationship between the student and the federal financial aid office at that local institution. It has severely limited our ability to provide you with data related to expected family contribution, Pell eligibility, the types of aid that a student might get, and it really has hampered research efforts on the efficacy of that program. And I should tell you that I've been advocating on your behalf nationally as part of a larger data policy group, and I've involved several major national professional organizations, but we still have not yet been able to get absolute and clear movement on this issue. So to your point, Mark, this is an area where our hands really are tied. And as much as it disgusts me because it hurts the very people we're trying to help through these intervention programs with federal aid dollars, it makes it very difficult. Also, please be aware that earning data, employment data are very challenging for us on our graduates. We recently engaged, and by we, I mean the digital strategy, the DSI group on campus under the direction of Vice President Fine, literally entered into a contractual relationship with MC to provide us with some of this information. But DARE can serve as a liaison for you on that, but just recognize that it's a challenge data set. We went way back, and so it may not provide you the full scope of coverage that you're needing. Cohort tracking has to be done manually for us. We have to identify who's in which cohort. We have to program them in, and we have to track them forward. So we don't have, unfortunately, yet a cohort tracking button that we can just build cohorts on the fly. That's something we're going to want to talk with you about. Then there's some data, quite frankly, that we just don't have. Marital status is not requested anywhere. Veteran status is a tricky one because what we have is actually benefits eligibility. And the state of Texas has this wonderful program called the Hazelwood program that provides veterans, their dependents, their spouses, and even in some cases, extended family members access to veteran financial benefit. Well, what that does is it confounds our ability to tell you exactly the difference between someone who is getting a veteran benefit because they're a spouse of a veteran versus someone who was active duty serving in a theater of combat. So there's some differences there that we just want you to be aware of. Same with immigration status. They're all going to be very hard for us to produce for you. I surface it here because we're asked all the time. We've even had a request once for what percentage of our current students are currently with child. That is a data point that I don't even know where I would begin to find you the pregnancy status of our students. But it has come through. I'm being recorded, so I want to be careful how I talk about that. And then just be aware that there's really no such thing as a simple request coming from there. There's always a simple question, but there's always complexities within the data. And so when you make a request to us, Please don't be offended if we ask you follow-up questions or we ask you clarifying questions. We're not trying to insult your intelligence. We're not trying to make your life challenging. What we are trying to do is to find out a little bit, drill down into what question you're exactly trying to answer, and then we can marshal the institutional resources to best support you with that question. The last thing I'll say is that data older than 2008 is limited. We had a major institutional database transition in 2005 with the new EIS PeopleSoft system. Anything really older than 2008, I would view with some level of suspicion. But yet we get asked all the time for 20, 30, sometimes even 40 years of longitudinal data. And the challenge with that is our organization and our academic structures have not stayed constant. Department changes, reorganizations, name changes, splits, it all creates a breadcrumbing challenge for the institution. Yes.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. We had one quick question from the audience before we move forward, and it was, when did the Department of Education make that change regarding the FAFSA data accessibility?
Thank you. The initial ruling we were told was coming in late 2018, early 2019. They have the Association for Institutional Research and ASH have both approached the Department of Education seeking clarification on this. That policy request never received a response. So we were working directly with lobbyists in DC to help us with that. It's a challenge. I hope that helps. Okay. So I've explained a lot of what we have. Insights is your go-to spot. Our institutional research website has a plethora of data, but I don't want to bias the sample any further, so let's ask the post-test question. Perfect.
While you're answering, I did want to underscore that Dr. Simon and his team are really professionals. They would add value as collaborators as well as named collaborators. There you go. Look at that.
Perfect.
I think you did pretty good, Jason.
Perfect.
Yeah, you know, they would a PI would add substantial value, not by just using you, quite frankly, but by incorporating you as a colleague, as a collaborator, and referencing your position.
Sure.
It adds nothing but value, and at reasonable cost, if you would. Not only that, what I want to point out is the fact that you guys are so astute at looking at these complex data sets. You actually could help point out and identify new research directions that a PI could follow and really add value. And in fact, there may even be a whole component part of the investigation that your team may say, we would love to do the deep dive here, and we'll partner with you back on a paper. So
Sure.
Tremendous opportunity here when you look at folks that we might typically think as providers, instead as collaborators, and,
Right.
and step forward in that way.
Thank you for saying that. Perfect.
So Jason, can you give us a couple of illustrations of queries that you've had come that have been really, really interesting in terms of what you've had to work on?
There's a lot happening right now around our HSI MSI status as a newly commissioned, if you will, HSI institution. It does open us up to a whole new avenue of potential funding in terms of HSI grants and companies that want to partner with the institution to promote our Hispanic student success. So we've recently seen a lot of requests for that information. So persistence of our Hispanic students, major selection, movement in, through, and out of the institution. Also looking at patterns around our Hispanic students' academic success, choice of major. Those are very frequent, especially in the area of the sciences. So how are we promoting pipelines of traditionally marginalized individuals into the sciences? And so we've been working with several faculty across the institution to help them identify metrics around our students in STEM. I would also say that there's been a lot of interest in relation to um, instructional efficacy and looking at modality and how modality might affect a student's ability to be successful. Obviously, I think the COVID-19 situation has forced the entire field of higher education to think differently about instructional modality, and I would not be surprised if we start to receive requests in the coming months after many campuses launch their fall plans to look to see what impact COVID-19 had on the ability of the ability of the institution and our faculty to deliver instruction. And so I think those are frequently asked questions. We also get a lot on gender differences, and so we're looking at males versus females. I will say that we do have a data limitation. We have a data blind spot there. As we exist currently right now, our institution is still utilizing a binary male, female, unknown. That does limit our ability to engage with you in more nuanced research around sexual orientation, sexual identity. And so that's something that I know that I would like to see personally changed within the environment. Because obviously we know there's a demographic shift occurring with our inbound student pipeline. The other area that I think we get pulled into sometimes is assisting with curricular level discussions or decisions. So what are emerging trends? What are what's happening out in the vocational arena that might present interesting opportunities for either grant support or research related to emerging fields. So there's a lot there. Mark, I don't know if I answered the question. That's just a scripted back of the envelope.
Yeah.
We did have another question in the
Great.
chat, and it's, what is the process if we are considering requesting data support? Do we need to first go through our department chair?
Wow, I don't think we've ever really considered that before. I would probably guide you to first look at our UNT data resources that are currently available. Let's make sure that we don't have something that's already there for you in self-serve that you can use. And then if you can't find what you need on some of the reference sites that I just shared, depending on what the protocol is, and Mark, you might want to jump in on this, depending on what guidelines the Division of Research has related to alerting their team if you intend to file for a research or a grant, that would probably kick in first, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Mark?
you know, the with Cayuse or whatever data system we'd have, we as soon as you start actually creating that proposal, even if it's months ahead of time, it actually queues up and alerts our staff. And it's probably good to remind everyone that come this week, literally, we have activated the department chair and dean's approval for process for all proposals going out of the university. That's brand new. And that's really because having been both a department chair and a dean previously, I wanted to know. I wanted to have a sense of the flow of creativity and drive for proposals going out. And so having that approval step was a part of that. But other than that, I mean, Jason, we expect these are smart individuals. They're going to engage with you early and often, and probably well before any proposal is really crafted. At least that would be smart. And I assume you'd welcome an open give and take of, hey, I'm scratching my head about this idea. What do you think, Jason? What's your team think? And
sure, and I recognize obviously that we have, we're not talking about large scale data structures that are, deeply scientific in nature. Most of the work that we assist with are social sciences research, or emerging demographic research related to 18 to 22-year-olds. But increasingly, we are being asked to also provide if we can't provide the data, providing some guidance as well about what other data sets are out there in the ether. And so we're very familiar with Texas Education Agency data, K through 12. We're very familiar with the Texas Higher Ed data sets. We certainly can even point you towards Texas Workforce Commission. There's a lot with data becoming more ubiquitous and becoming more transparent. There's a lot of sources out there that we might be able to assist you with. So certainly don't mind having that brainstorming process. And I would say, you feel free to start off by just sending me an email at jason.simon@unt.edu. We can get that ball rolling. And if I don't know the answer, certainly we have a network of really smart people, both within the DARE office, but also amongst you and your fellow colleagues that we could reach out to and look for opportunities to support you in that way.
It's probably good, Jason, to underscore FERPA also. There are places where, people's knee-jerk reaction is, well, FERPA, okay, I've got to make sure that's all done with the grants office. Well, no, actually, FERPA is more about your professional status as a professor here on this campus. That's immediately the umbrella you're under. This is more for your employment status, where you have to understand the rules of FERPA and what you can and cannot do with educational data. So, we're pretty careful to remind people of that, but really look inside your academic program and leadership for guidance on FERPA and your own training.
Yeah, and there's a great website. Maybe this would be helpful to everyone. If you just go to the main UNT page and search FERPA, you will actually find the link fairly quickly. It's a registrar function. The registrar's office is empowered by system policy to be the gatekeeper, if you will, on that. It's a fairly, I wouldn't say easy process. But it is thorough. You'll go through and in the series of screens, you'll understand your expectations as a researcher and as a member of our community. And then it's a form that you'll have to print out, fill out, and then your department chair most likely will have to sign off on providing you with that role. That form then gets sent to the registrar's office. They will literally go into PeopleSoft EIS system and give you a role that when we then look you up, we will see that FERPA role is there. And then we're able to know with confidence that we've crossed all of the institutional checkboxes to be able to give you what you need. Now, if you're asking for aggregated data, sorry, Naomi, if you're asking purely for aggregated data, not at the individual student level, then FERPA does not apply. FERPA kicks in when you are asking about an individual, just like HIPAA kicks in for when people start asking about your own personal medical procedure data or your own personal medical background. It's the same for our students. And there's some funky situations where we're not even allowed to give out a student's educational data to their parent because technically the student is of age and considered an adult. And so FERPA kicks in there. So it's very squirrely.
Okay, we had a private message come in and then another public one. Someone asked, can you speak a little bit more about multi-institutional collaborations and your thoughts on not only data sharing, but sharing platforms, security considerations, and processes we might have in place for that?
Yeah, this is where FERPA also makes it incredibly hard. And I think, when FERPA was first created, it was created during a time when we didn't have all of these databases and data connections. And, it really was meant as a way to safeguard individual information. We really find ourselves in some challenging water. And to give you the extent of the challenge, we're not even legally allowed to share information with UNT Dallas. So if we have student information that occurred at the time when they were technically our student, but it was right when Dallas was being birthed, we're not even able to share that. And so that gives you some sense of if we have challenges within our own system, it becomes a little bit more of a burden than looking at issues of transfer status, transfer credit, transfer outcomes. We get a lot of requests from our local 2-year institutions about following up on their students and how well they did or did not do. And it makes for some very frustrating conversations. That's one of those things where I wish if I could wave my magic DARE wand and take away all of the hurdles, that we would be moving towards a better place. Now, I will say there is a bright spot emerging. The Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board has just entered into a long-term relationship with the National Student Clearinghouse. And so the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board will be able to do a lot more for us on showing where our students are in terms of mobility. And Mark, I don't want to warn you, but I just heard some lightning and thunder outside my window. So if we lose power, thank you all for the opportunity. But we're going to keep going, just depending that there is no bad weather on the horizon.
It's outside my window too.
Yeah. So the other challenge we have is inconsistencies from a data governance perspective between systems. So how one institution governs what it determines to be a data element may differ from another agency or another institution or organization. And so this is where really looking and drilling into exactly what your research question is really can become very, very important very quickly. And really understanding what your limitations and delimitations are will help us help you then in framing out what the data you might need. And so those are two really important things to think about when we start trying to connect data across disparate sources. And I know we have some data science faculty on this call today, so hopefully they're sitting there and nodding their head vigorously too. At the end of the time, we spend about 90% of the time dealing with 10% of the data and some of its messes related to it. So data cleansing and data quality, that's something that no matter what we do is always going to be ever present. And I think, Naomi, you said you had another question.
Yes, we have two. I have a couple coming in public and private. So can we come to you when we are proposing new programs or only for research projects?
As the source of institutional official data, we are happy to have you come to us with those opportunities if you're proposing new programs, but that would definitely be one that you would want to make sure you are following academic policy on how we start that process. You'd also want to make sure that you work through the academic affairs leadership structure so that they're aware. Because we are beheld to the THECB on their process for the creation of new programs, there's different levels of rigor, there's different levels of analysis, and certainly that's something that we would want to partner with you, your dean, and most likely the accreditation office to make sure that we're not out in front of each other in a way that might be considered dangerous and or foolhardy, because there are lots of little hurdles in trying to develop a new academic program, and we want to be careful we work with you, not against you on that.
Thank you for answering that. Another private message, is it possible for you to describe how a researcher would send the students a FERPA and IRB form for online classes? Do you need a copy of the FERPA forms and IRB forms to provide the data to the researchers? We have some
once again,
folks on the call too.
remember once again the difference between IRB, technically IRB approval is important to allow you to continue on with your research. For us, the IRB approval does not hold as much weight as the FERPA hurdle we have to jump over. So that's not to say that we would ever say you don't want to go through IRB. In fact, that's just considered what we all do as professionals and researchers. But sometimes there's a challenge when you present your methodology to IRB and don't involve our office, and then we get the request after the fact, and it puts us and you in a rather tenuous position of having to go back to IRB and saying, never mind, what I proposed is not available or unable to be gotten. And so that's why we're talking about trying to come to us a little bit earlier if you can.
Great. And how do they sign up for the UNT Insights training in Zoom?
That is a fantastic question. And I want to basically throw this out there with a little caveat. On July 27th, we are launching Insights 2.0. And we have spent the last 18 months putting new structures in place to make Insights even easier to use, even better to use. And we're going to be incorporating new opportunities within it. So in the short term, between now and July 27th, all you would have to do is send an email to insights@unt.edu, or if you go to the institutionalresearch.unt.edu page, there's a link there for requesting training. Now, coming July 27th, we are rolling out a brand new website. On that website will be the ability for you to not only learn about the various trainings, but there will be a dynamic online calendar that you will be able to literally schedule yourself for a date and a time, and then it'll take you immediately to a UNT ServiceNow request where you're able to give us all your information, and we're making this as turnkey and as easy as possible for you. But I will say that Insights is it is a treasure trove, quite honestly, of potential opportunity for you. And there's so much there, and we're only adding to it. And I think that's what's so exciting. We're really trying to move past generic reporting and really move us into predictive analytics and even data science, machine learning. So this is all evolving very quickly. It's very exciting.
Jason, can you introduce us to the names of some of your team? Just
Yes.
so that if they don't reach you but happen to reach them.
Sure. I would say that Dr. Mary Barton is a phenomenal contact. Mary is a long-term institutional researcher. She's the former president of the Texas Association for Institutional Research. If there's an IR recognition out there, Mary has probably gotten it. I like to joke, Mary knows not only where the skeletons are buried, but also the tools that put the skeletons in the closet. So she's a wonderful person to know. If you have a question regarding Insights and Insights training and data management and data governance, Dr. Dan Hubbard, Hubbard, is a relatively newer professional to UNT. We poached him from UT Dallas. His PhD is actually in neuroscience. And I love that we get to bring in a neuroscientist to work on data management and data governance, because he approaches thinking about information, data, and data resources in a very scientific way. And I think he'll be a tremendous partner to you. Then depending on what other data domain you have a question in, we can then serve as a white glove service to introduce you maybe to some of the other individuals across campus who oversee data domains, who manage those types of information. The DARE staff also has a data modeling component, but they're not really as front and center and public for some of the requests that you would have. I think between myself, Dr. Hubbard, and Dr. Barton, you will be in good stead. And sometimes it doesn't even hurt to CC all three of us. We don't mind that. It allows us then to sort of put our collective thinking caps together to figure out how to best respond back to you.
You know, Jason, the fun part of all this is we get to know you. We've been introduced to your team, but we get to know you. And that means so much when researchers get a sense of who the person behind the curtain is. Not that you've been not called a wizard before, but you know, when you have the management over that kind of database, it's pretty amazing. And boy, we sure appreciate taking the time and introducing the programs, and like I said, more importantly, introducing yourself. I am sure you're going to see a number of partnerships come out of this. And so,
love it. And I would say, if I'm being transparent, my scholarly work, as of recently, I'm a journal editor right now, and I'm a contributing author on several journals. A lot of what I'm writing about right now is data culture and future-proofing higher education in terms of data and information resources. And so a lot of what I'm being called upon and asked to speak, talk, and write about is related to connecting data with decision-making. And so if that's an area of possible collaboration that you want to talk to me about, I'm happy to serve as a co-author in that regard. There's a lot of room, there's a lot of confusion out there right now within both higher education organizations and other industries about how to leverage data within a culture-based approach. And I think it's a real opportunity.
You bet. You bet. Well, Naomi, look at this. Another Research Breaks. What a great fun time.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you all for joining us. And thank you, Jason. Do you like to be called Dr. Simon?
Jason is fine.
Jason. Okay, Jason.
I just make my children call me Dr. Simon.
That's appropriate. So thank you all for being with us. We hope, and this was so insightful, no pun. We really hope you join us in 2 weeks for our next session with Autumn Pinkard and Jamie Pino. They'll be talking about animal research at UNT and what that looks like with our IACUC Institutional Review Board for Animals. So please join us then. Spread the word to your students, faculty, that we'll be having a session all about IACUC and animal research and what that looks like at UNT. So thank you for joining. Have a lovely weekend. If you celebrate the holiday, have a lovely holiday. And we look forward to seeing you again.
Everybody stay safe out there. Okay, thank you all for the opportunity. It's a pleasure.
Stay safe.
Bye now.
Bye.